We've discussed in the past that a Yid actually consists of three very clearly identifiable madregas, levels. A behemoth, a human being, and godly. And that's what we were discussing, that there is the seichel or nefesh, and the seichel bahami, the behemoth type of seichel that a person has, the human type of seichel, enushi, and seichel eliki, a godly seichel. We can see things from a godly perspective. And we briefly discussed then the lower two levels of seichel bahami and seichel enushi. Seichel eliki I haven't touched as yet, and we'll, as time goes on, have a chance to go into that a little bit. This is the structure of a human being, and we are instructed by Torah and by Chassidus that we have to incorporate every aspect of the human being in our life. We cannot say, since there's an animal within me, there's a madrega that's animalistic, and there's a human madrega. Let me just ignore the animal and just live at the human level. Okay, let me explain. There is a saying of the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov explains a verse, a pasuk in the Torah. The pasuk speaks about an animal that's saddled to a wagon and or loaded with merchandise, and the animal fell down and the merchandise on top of it. And the Torah speaks about the obligation that we have to help the person who is involved, to help him uplift his animal, to unload, to release all the weight from the animal, help him lift the animal up, and then load it back. The pasuk, the verse in the Torah is that if you will see the donkey that belongs to your enemy. Senacha does not mean enemy. Senacha means someone that you dislike, that you're at odds with. It's lying flat beneath its weight. You may have a thought and say, I want to ignore him, I don't want to help him, because after all I dislike him. So then you're instructed, you should go ahead and help and assist with him and lift up the animal, put the weight back on, and let him go on his journey. This is the din in the Torah. Every mitzvah in the Torah has the simple pshat, the halacha, the practical inyan, and it also has, every mitzvah has a deeper and a higher level where it is to be performed, in a more ruchnistic sense. And the Baal Shem Tov explains that in ruchnis, in avodah ruchnis, in individual avodah of a person, there is an exact replay of this inyan, and there is an instruction coming from this pasuk. And this is referring to the fact that every person has a chamoyer, has a donkey, has an animal within himself. His goof, his nefesh habahamis. And this goof is loaded up with tasks, with work. He is told to do work. He is told to get up in the morning when the goof would prefer to just while away the time. He is told to grab hold of loads, meaning to go ahead and produce certain work, and the goof would rather not do it. And therefore the goof falls down beneath its weight and he lays away. So you, as a human being, or as a godly soul, would think, who is this goof that I should get involved with? This is a chamoy, this is a donkey, this is an animal. Why do I want to get involved with this goof? I'm going to ignore him, which means I'm just going to punish the goof and force him to do it in a way that is not conducive to the goof ultimately consenting and joining in my work, but rather just beat it down, such as fasting, tormenting myself, so that the goof would not interfere with what I want to do with my seichel, with my mind and heart. And I will go on and live as a human being, on the human level, on the spiritual level. So the Torah admonishes us and says, Ozoiv ta'zoiv imoy. This is not what Hashem wants. You must help along with the donkey, with your own donkey. And to jump across and ignore this donkey is not Hashem's will. If you follow that path, you're ignoring the direction that Hashem has set for us. How do we accomplish this? How do we get our donkey to work along with us, to accept the yoke, to accept the masa, to accept the merchandise and carry it willingly? For this, in Hasidus, there is a whole Torah, so to speak, a whole well-developed explanation as to how we are to deal with the nefesh habahamis. How we should deal with the nefesh habahamis to get it hooked up, to get it submissive, but not destroyed. Destroying is not the path. It's not what we're looking for.
Hashem doesn't want us to be tzaddik.
To be a tzaddik?
When we destroy it, when we do a tzaddik, no?
No. He destroys the tzaddik, just want to answer, he destroyed the evil in it, not it. The evil inclination, not the body itself.
How come the little man said that he made his heart empty from the face? You just mentioned about face, that you cannot torture our body with face. But the little man said that he
didn't torture his body. The Alter Rebbe also was engaged in a lot of fasting. The Alter Rebbe was engaged in a lot of fasting himself. Whatever his reasons were to elevate himself. And he used to test himself whether he's still allowed to fast. In other words, whether he is actually affecting the strength, his physical strength, where he would have to stop. He's not allowed to affect his physical strength. I'll explain in a minute what the process is, just to put your minds at ease, so we can go on with the task, with the point. The Alter Rebbe used to test himself. The Alter Rebbe was naturally a gibber. he was very, very strong physically. And he used to test himself in fasting, when he's allowed to fast, to continue fasting, by lifting up a slew of Gemaras. You know, these huge Gemaras, like those, with one hand like this. And if he was able to do it, then he's allowed to fast, continue. If he's not able to do it, that means that he has reached the limit and he has to stop fasting. So this all in David HaMelech as well. David HaMelech did not destroy his body. He was fasting to eliminate the desires coming directly from the body, which I'll explain in as much as we can accomplish in the session, but not destroying the body itself. The body has to be healthy, and the Rambam says that the Yeis Haguf, body, that the Guf should be healthy, midarke Hashemhu. Is part of the Derech Hashem, part of the path of following Hashem's ways in life. And this is why, in fact, the Rambam has a whole chapter or two describing what are the methods that one has to employ to keep himself healthy, what he should eat, when he should eat, and so forth. Because health is part of Derech HaTorah. So clearly it doesn't mean that. What are we talking about? How do you teach the Guf? And what are the inyonim that we see? We know there is fasting that were used in previous generations, where the Alter Rebbe clearly says in Tanya that these generations, because they are physically weakened, we're no longer permitted to fast, except for the 4 fasts that are general community fasts. And altogether, what does it mean we fast? How is fasting cleanse the body? What does that do? What does it mean? I wasn't going to talk about fasting. I was going to talk about the other aspect that the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya. This is practical for today. The Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya various methods to employ to counteract, to stand up to the Nefesh Habahamis, be able to overcome the influences of the behemoth that's within us. And one of the things that he mentions over there, that from the Gemara, that there is a certain moment where one should actually arouse anger on his Nefesh Habahamis, on his Yetzer Hara. Should be angry on his Yetzer Hara. And subdue it in his mind in terms of saying, you are a behemoth, and why are you interfering with my avodah? And I want to put this in perspective so that we can understand what is this about, how does this actually peter out, how does it work? When the person screams at himself, you're a behemoth, who is the one who is screaming? It's the behemoth screaming at the behemoth. What is going on? How can a person divorce himself from himself and say, okay, you're a behemoth? And what will happen if he screams at it? I mean, it seems a little bit odd, this whole process. For this purpose, in order we should be able to understand this concept, we have discussed, when I discussed the 3 levels in Seichel, I pointed out that there are actually in the person's mind 3 distinct levels of Seichel, 3 distinct ways how a person perceives himself in the world. In other words, when we say a person should behave like a human being, behaving like a human being is not what we are talking about. We're talking about being a human being. behaving like a human being, you can get an animal to behave like a human being. But it's the same animal. There is an actual nefesh. It's called nefesh hasichlis, nefesh ho'elokis, the godly soul. Then there is the nefesh habahamis, the behemoth soul. The behemoth soul has two distinct levels. One is the nefesh hasichlis, the seichel nefesh, the seichel, the nefesh that relates to seichel. And then there's the nefesh hachiyunis, the nefesh that relates to physical life. This is part of the nefesh habahamis. It is very important, at the minimum, that we should understand and be able to relate to this inyan of nefesh hasichlis, as we discussed then. The principle of nefesh hasichlis, or nefesh or seichel anushi, as I explained then, that seichel anushi does not mean that I can logically argue that a certain thing is correct or incorrect. Is correct to do or incorrect to do. For instance, I can argue, briefly rehashing what we spoke about, I can argue logically that to go and steal from somebody else's property is not a good idea. Why? Because if I steal from him, he's going to steal back from me. And you're going to destroy the entire civilized structure. This logic is necessary for the behemoth. The behemoth that does not distinguish, that does not appreciate the difference between my property, his own property, and someone else's property, who does not know that, as we'll discuss a little bit, the intrinsic difference, value of being honest. So the only way you can convince the behemoth that it is an appropriate behavior is by showing it that of the long-term results that come out of it. But a human being, the nefesh hasichlis, the nefesh, the seichel anushi, you don't have to come to that. A human being who needs to be explained through this logic that he should not touch someone else's property is missing something. He has not touched on his human qualities. He doesn't really live. He doesn't really experience what it means to be a human being. Excuse me. Right. The nefesh habahamis was the animal attitude versus the human attitude, and I want to go a little bit deeper into it and a little clearer into it, and then we'll understand how we can actually redirect it, how we can actually treat it, and what it means to scream at the animal. The animal cannot relate to real values. The animal relates only to that which it sees in front of its eyes. That's its reality. You can explain to the animal till you're red in the face that this field belongs to someone else and you cannot venture into it. And the animal will look at it, oh yeah, I understand, and then it'll say, okay, that's where I'm going. What's the difference? Because it still looks exactly the same. It's still identical. It still looks exactly the same. And no matter how much he explains it to himself, it remains the same, and it remains a tremendous difficulty to abstain from it, because I do not see the difference between someone else's and mine. The same thing applies to higher inyan, kosher and non-kosher food. You cannot explain to the animal that this is not kosher and this is kosher. He does not see the difference. And if he doesn't see the difference, it becomes what's called kriyas yamsuf. It becomes a real challenge for him to say, I cannot eat this, I can only eat this. Because he cannot relate to any of these concepts that you explained to him. The reason he cannot relate to any of these concepts is very simple. He does not perceive any existence, any being beyond that which his eyes observe. Beyond that which he can feel with his hand and foot. And since everything that we see, everything in the world that we come in contact with, has a physical representation, and therefore the physical representation conceals the greater and the more significant meaning behind it, and that's why he cannot relate to it. He cannot relate to it not because he refuses, but in fact he does not see it. This is identical, and I'm saying again, it's identical to trying to explain to a donkey, don't go in someone else's field. Even though this is a human being, you think, a human being has intelligence. The only thing you can intelligently explain, the difference between a donkey, a physical donkey, a down-to-earth real donkey, and the donkey within us, is that the donkey, the physical donkey, you say, if you go there, you're going to get a hit, and the donkey within us will say, if you go there, he's going to come back and take yours. You're going to get a reprisal for it. If you steal, if you commit a crime, if you transgress on civil law, the police are going to get after you and throw you into jail. This is no different than training a donkey by hitting it. So different. Just as a donkey, when it is trained and shown, you can go this way. If you go this way, you're going to get hit. Does not render the donkey human, even though the donkey is walking a straight path. And he is not venturing in other people's fields. Oh, the donkey is so smart, he doesn't go over into people's fields. We attributed human qualities. We don't. It doesn't become human as a result. In its animal level of orientation, it knows it shouldn't go there. Likewise, when a human being will abstain from crime because he will be caught by police, he doesn't become a human as a result. This is his animal. But we have to know that we are really human beings. In other words, in addition to this quality that we have, and we cannot ignore as we'll see, but we also have a different quality completely. And the function and the purpose The ultimate hope of Chassidus is not just to subdue the donkey. It is to reveal the human being. That's what Chassidus is about. To get one to sense what it means to be human. At the minimum, then there is, as I said, there is what it means to be godly, but that's, a quantum leap from there. It's a different soul completely, different orientation totally. But at the minimum, we have to be human. The human qualities that we possess, the human being, the human soul, is contained in the same body that the animal soul is contained, that the donkey is. And the information that the human soul observes and obtains, it obtains it through the process of going through the donkey. In effect, it is the animal that tells him, I see this, or I see this. Because, as I said, our first order, first level of relating, of recognition, of observation in the world is through the goof. And there we just see a physical object, and it says nothing what the object is about. It says nothing. Who it belongs to, is it a holy book or is it a piece of rock? That says nothing. Thus, we cannot ignore the animal. The animal is the guy that attaches us, that tells us there is a table over here, there's a chair over here, there's something physical over here. This is the physical world. We cannot ignore it. But once we find out that there is something here, then we want to understand with our human qualities, what is it? And this is where the animal balks. This is where the conflict comes in. The animal says, I told you about it, and now you're going to tell me what it is? I'm the one who discovered it for you. And you are now going to take over and say, yes, you discovered it, but I want you to know you don't go there. And this is where the conflict is. And this is where the human soul, the human mind, comes in and says to the animal, this is actually, it's two people within one person. What are the two people? The one that perceives and actually relates and sees the physical world, and the one that makes sense of it. The one that says that the fact that there's just physical objects doesn't make sense. Physical objects. In what order, in what organization are they? Are they organized, or are they haphazardly strewn around? And he looks around, like we spoke the other day. He sees that the world is not a haphazard desert. There is a day, there's a night, there's a sunrise, precisely a certain moment. There's a sunset, precisely a certain moment. There are 4 seasons. There are months, there is years. There is a whole structure, a whole system of irrigation, of water flow, of rivers. It's not a haphazard type of entity. So he says to the animal, you discovered it for me, but I'm going to tell you what it's about. It's not just there for you to do whatever I want. I have to figure out and understand what is there. You told me there is a house over here, there's a building, there are walls and floors and ceilings. But they're not just walls and floors and ceilings. These walls were put up by someone in a certain way for a certain purpose. And if you come inside these walls, you're going to understand and know how to behave there. What's it for? This is a holy place. This has a certain function, a purpose. And the human being says, I can only relate to something that is humanly real, not real on the animal level, but that is real on the human level. It has to have a human quality. It has to have a human value for me to relate to it. The animal says, "Oh, there is something there." Says, "Wait a second. What's there? What value is it?" So, well, there's something there. There's a place to run around. He says, "Run around? That's for you, but it's not for me. I don't waste my time running around. In order for me to run around, I have to have a purpose. I have to have a meaning. But, it has to have a place in my seichel. It has to make sense as to what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. This is the minimum. Before I do something, it has to make sense why I'm doing it. And this is where the conflict is. The animal says, "Let's go." And the human says, "Where go? What go?" On the other hand, there's the opposite side. The human being says, "Let's get up, wash up, and go down to the Medrash and do our thing." And the animal says, "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm very comfortable in this bed." This is what the Alter Rebbe explains to us. Says that we should know, we should not be disappointed when we see that we have interference from the animals all the time. It's a distinct entity which does not know of anything except, like everything else, except what it can relate to. What do you want from him? He's an animal. He doesn't know anything else. You can't start convincing him because he doesn't have the brain power to understand it. You can't argue it out. There is no way that he will relate to what you are thinking. And this is where you have to employ the method of training your own animal. The method to train your own animal, the same method as you would train a physical animal. How do we train an animal? We harness it, we put yokes on it, we limit its whereabouts until it gets trained. A horse, everybody knows that a horse is not born with a yoke on it and to walk straight. A horse has to be tamed before it can be harnessed. And once it's harnessed, he goes in its way. He accepts the yoke willingly. He follows the path. Does that mean that the horse appreciates that he is now transporting human beings from one place to another? He's doing a great service. He has absolutely no idea. He did not become human as a result of this training. But he is a very good servant. He follows the direction, he follows the rules, follows the commands, and he actually helps human beings accomplish their task. The identical methodology is what Chassidus refers to when it says that you have to train, you have to force the guf. And this is the important message, the important point that I want that it should be clear. Because when you say you have to force, you have to beat up on your animal, on the one hand, as we said before, it doesn't make any sense. Right? How can one beat up on himself? And if one begins to beat up on himself, then Chas v'Sholom, what happens? He destroys him. He falls into atzvus. He falls into a despondency. He loses enthusiasm of his life. He says, "Oh, I'm so low. I'm so depraved." He's beating up on himself. That's not what the Torah is talking about. To beat up on himself. There's a certain point when the Alter Rebbe speaks to the Beinoni. You know that the Tanya is to the Beinoni. The Tanya is what's called the Beinoni, the intermediate person, the average person. The intermediate person of the Tanya, we all know, is a very wide range, and some people in this category are extremely, extremely high, and some people in this category are much lower. But it's a very wide range. But this is the range that the Alter Rebbe speaks to, the Beinoni. And he says that the Beinoni will think to himself, he will fall into sadness by seeing that when he davens, let's say, all of a sudden he has extraneous thoughts, disturbing things. He cannot concentrate properly. He's disturbed. It's hard for him to do a mitzvah. Whatever difficulty a person has, he begins to attack himself for having that shortcoming. And he begins to attack himself for having that shortcoming. This will throw him down. The Alter Rebbe says, this is not what we are talking about. On the contrary, he says, you think that you're beating up on yourself, and you're saying you're so low because you have this shortcoming. If you dig down a little deeper, the Alter Rebbe says, you'll find that this beating up on yourself actually originates in a sense of gaiva. Gaiva. In the sense of... Of,
Chapter Kafvav, 26.
In English?
Yeah, in the sense of pride. Saying, because how can I have these shortcomings? I am such a great person. I'm supposed to be perfect. A tzaddik. This is not what we're talking about. Chassidus is a very systematic, organized path. Torah in general, Chassidus, that deals with human life, with daily confrontation within the person. We have to understand, as I said, that the human quality, and certainly the godly quality in a person, is not stand in his way to do Torah mitzvahs, or to do that which is right. The human and godly is to different levels. It is the animal, and the animal is there for a very, very good reason, because just as we know in the illustration, in the example, that only the horse and the donkey are enabled us to get from here to there and carry all these loads. Likewise, in our lives, in our practical daily lives, we are required Our task in life is to function in physical world. To function in physical world means that you have to employ the animal, because only the animal relates and can touch the physical world. But we have to harness the animal. We have to tell him. And the animal will not understand what you are saying, but the animal will obey if you force him to obey. He will not understand why he cannot go in the other person's property, but he will obey if you force him to. He will not understand why you have to get up now, but he will obey if you force him to obey. But then, you do not come back to yourself, oh, the whole thing that I'm doing, I'm forcing myself. No, you're not, you're forcing the animal. But there is a human being there that is on top of, that's riding on top of this animal, who is guiding it, who is leading it. You have to relate to the human in there, in that process, not to the animal. The animal has to be a means to accomplish it. But who is doing it? The animal travels from place to place. Who is leading it? Who is driving it? It's the human being who's riding on top of it. So there is no conflict. In other words, there is no degradation to the human being, to the person, when he says, I'm forcing myself to do this, I'm forcing myself to do this, I'm forcing myself to do this. Forcing oneself means forcing the animal. And who is forcing the animal? The human being. And as a result of this relationship, as a result of this approach, what actually happens, and this is the most important aspect to realize, that at first it is the animal that informs me about my whole surrounding. My first orientation is what's doing in the physical world. But as I am harnessing the animal and I'm directing it to act in a certain way and to allow the human being to function as a human being, the more you harness the animal, the more you permit the human being to surface. In other words, we are not to subdue and beat up on the human being. We subdue and beat up on the animal, and thereby allow our minds and hearts to open up. So that when we beat up on ourselves, instead of what may appear that we're beating up on our minds, we're beating up on our hearts, we are destroying ourselves, we are building and we allow them to come forth. It allows the human being to come forth and become active without the interference of the animal, but with the full service of the animal. This is an important point, obviously from a Chassidus perspective and so forth, but in today's day and age, and everyone is exposed to today's day and age, and the common wisdom today is the wisdom of the psychology and psychiatry is, don't beat up on the person. Let him have his way, and thereby he will feel good about himself. This is what will give him an enthusiasm into his life. And this is a profound error. Because what they're doing is they're giving vent to the animal and concealing the human. And for a moment it seems, I'm open, and then after a short while, the human cries out even more. Because the human is being concealed and contained in the animal. And he is totally distraught, he's totally saddened. He says, I see the whole world, but I don't see any purpose in it. So they tell him, okay, so go and enjoy yourself a little more. He goes and enjoys himself a little more, and he sees even less purpose in life. In order to open up the human wellspring, you have to force down on the animal. Not destroy it, but use it for human purposes. And this is how these two work together, and this is the meaning of screaming at your animal. And this is the meaning that as a result, like we said, fasting, we're not talking about fasting as I said in these days, but as a result of forcing oneself, you're not really you're not really subduing yourself. By forcing yourself, you are bringing out and giving vent and giving strength to the human being who's riding on top of the animal. Yeah.
You just mentioned like understanding that one of the ways to harness the animal, so to speak, is to be angry and scream a little bit. So let's say your animal, let's say, interested to engage in some forbidden activity from military, let's say. And now you are angry and you're screaming, and then in the middle of the screaming, you decide, you know what, let me go and do it first. And you go, let's say, and do it, first of all, you go and you know. And then afterwards, whatever you have said and whatever it might be. And my question basically is like this: that this process is always like repeating itself. Because I mean, sometimes you are winning, sometimes you go through. Sometimes you might scream and you're okay with this. An animal goes down and you go first and right there. Sometimes not. I'm just saying it's almost like a circle. You know, you're not moving. It's very hard to see the moving forward. You see always back up on the same track, you know, on the same place where you're starting from. So how you understand what my question is?
Yeah. The method that we've described consists of two parts. One part is what we described, the taming of the animal, and not being afraid to force the animal to obey the human being. And recognize that this is not destroying yourself, this is the proper combination. The other side, though, you also have to develop the human being. In other words, if you tamed an animal, the animal, you have a horse that's able to run, but you don't have a runner. Right, to have a runner. Then you have to start developing and building and bringing out the human being. The animal is put in its place. So now he is sitting straight at this table, and he has a book in front of him, and he lets you do it. Now do it. Now you have to go and learn and understand it. Again, understanding it with the human seichel, not with the animal seichel. Don't try to explain it to the animal. Explain it to the human being. Try to see the soul of what you learn. Try to see the real significance and real meaning. And then the human being actually flourishes. And no, it stops a cycle. There is a constant move. But it has to be, as I said, both parallel. Just by fighting without developing, then you're doing nothing.
And to provide a meaning for human beings, why does it be an animal?
That's right. Otherwise, it's nothing.
No.
Otherwise, well, we're not going to go too much into this, but otherwise, again, it's the same thing like the Alter Rebbe says. He's trying to tame the animal so that he should look human. But when the animal looks human, it doesn't become human.
Intellectual soul, intermediate, has to work.
That's right. That's right. We have to then bring the human being to start learning and understanding. Learning for the purpose of really comprehending and getting into it and having a feel for what we learn. Understand the significance and the meaning of what we learn.
You said before that the animal has two aspects to it, and one was the intellectual aspect of the animal, right?
The animal soul.
Right, the animal soul. And when I don't know if I got mixed up, but when you were explaining that the intellectual aspect of the animal soul, we can use this to work against the animal itself.
Yeah.
But wouldn't the intellectual aspect of the animal soul work against the human in an
No,
intellectual way
that's
to make a...
This is the intellectual aspect of the animal soul is called the human soul. It's not the godly soul.
Mm-hmm. It just works for us. It doesn't work against us. Like you can. This isn't like something like when you have a taiva to do something, or you want to do something, and you develop a whole chachma behind it. Something that's very logical.
When you have a taiva in the animal soul, just very briefly, there are two madrigas. There is a seichel and midas. The midas, that's a taiva. That's a yetzer hara.
So it's a bad example. What I'm saying.
No. That's the yetzer hara. In the nefesh abamis itself, there is a yetzer hara, and there is the nefesh abamis, which is called the seichel of the nefesh abamis. The seichel of nefesh abamis does not work against us. The yetzer hara works against us. The seichel of nefesh abamis, if left alone, if you do not teach it, yes, it can become supportive of the yetzer hara, become subservient to the yetzer hara. But on the other hand, the seichel of nefesh abamis and seichel anusha, as we spoke last time, is actually the intermediary, the means by which we can come and understand the godly concepts. But first, just as the Gemara says, derech eretz kadma Torah, okay? Derech eretz precedes Torah. What is derech eretz? What is derech eretz?
The way of the land.
The way of the land. The proper way to live in the world. It's been derech eretz. Why is it kadma Torah? Why is it before Torah? We're not talking about derech eretz that appears to be human. We're talking about derech eretz where he actually has a human sense of right and wrong. Derech eretz. He doesn't do that which is wrong because it is wrong, not because of the repercussions that come from it. And he does that which is right, not because it is right, not because of the rewards that come for it, and the appreciation and the covet is going to get for it. That aspect of derech eretz is in fact kodma Torah. There is no way you can begin to appreciate and learn a concept in Torah if you have not developed yet a seichel anushi, a seichel where you understand that there are intrinsic values. That values are not based on reward and punishment, but there are real values, the real truths, at the lower level, at the human level. Once you appreciate that, then you'll be able to appreciate true values, it's called godly values, which is an entirely a world apart. Okay? Okay. That's a prescription. That's Lachar Rabba.